American network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
First, I hold my hands out like they're on a steering wheel. Then I look over my shoulder. 1, okay, cool guy. 2, 3 times. Next, oh, I put it in reverse. Meep, meep, meep. Then I take it up and down, up and down. And that, kiddos, is called the forklift.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids.
Now that's dancing. Sure beats flossing.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
This is a test of the emergency podcast system. Activated by contract termination. Rumors of our demise are greatly exaggerated. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington. She's blessed to be a Bible-reading, gun-toting, Air Force veteran, wife and mom, righteously American.
Welcome to the show. Okay, so if you're watching the live stream right now, you can see the chat, and in the chat, people are checking in to see who is in the room. Tracy, Smoke, Richard Layton, and they're requesting that someone named Norm join the chat. That's what we need. So first, I'll switch the camera over. I love my chat room, folks. Hey, y'all, back in the chair. Yesterday was an abnormal day for us because normally when I have a speaking engagement, I still come here and do a show. But we had a bit of a extended family emergency, which prevented me from being here. And I really appreciate the people who were like, where are you? I'm glad to know that you miss me when I'm not here. But yesterday was just a very, very difficult day. And family comes first. Extended family comes first. We had to step outside. It's friends. They're not technically our family, but friends. So I had to be there instead of being here. And that just happened. And I know you guys understand that. And I just want to, for the good of the order, can I just say, I'm still glad to be here. It might seem like, because I've had some absences over the past week and a half, that you're thinking, is she still into this? I am. But life has been pretty interesting. And it's been pretty tough. So I'm not complaining. I am so grateful that I get to sit here. You know, we're here. We're doing this. And I also want to point out that when I get to do a speaking engagement like the one yesterday, that is where we can get more people to know about the show, to listen in, to download the podcast, to be a part of our partnership that we have with the listeners, where we're listener-supported radio and podcasting. And for me to get a chance to kind of operate in some of the other gifts, namely giving a speech. So yesterday I spoke to the Pastor's Appreciation Luncheon, which is an annual event that Bot Radio Network puts on here in St. Louis. And I think we had between 200 and 250 people there. I didn't actually count the tables. I was too busy laughing and making friends. And my speech was about 3 stories. 3 stories. So I'm going to be sharing that with you later on in the third segment. I'm actually going to share it with you. You can kind of give me your feedback on it. And I think we're going to have a YouTube video of the actual speech, where I'm afraid to say, unless we do some heavy editing, you might see a little bit of moisture popping up on my forehead because the lights were really bright. And the outfit that I was wearing was a little on the warm side, it felt like, even though I was fine when I wasn't on the stage. So anyway, what's on the show today? Well, we're going to be talking about a lot of things, namely the debate last night. It is so interesting that the Democrats continue to come up with they're spectacles. It's the oddest thing to see a bunch of grown-ups basically competing for the opportunity to be the weirdest out of the bunch, the weirdest people they can be. That's what it seems like is happening. So that's fine. I guess they're going to do what they're going to do. And we're going to have to do what we're going to have to do. So I saw a lot of discussion about the debates last night, namely the kind of incoherent nature of Joe Biden's commentary and some other things that were going on. I want to first launch off into a deal being reached to end the GM strike. So the UAW is striking against GM for better pay and benefits. And I'm just going to sip my tea real quick. It's not tea, it's coffee. I get it. I get it. You want more pay and benefits. But do you even care if your company stays alive? Wouldn't it be kind of like me demanding a whole bunch of pay and benefits for doing whatever I do besides this job, besides the podcast? And the person saying, well, if we pay you more, then we won't be able to continue your job. You'll only get the more pay until the end of the year. And then next year, we won't be able to, no one here will have a job because all of you can't have, the pay and benefits that you're demanding. And then I say, okay, give me the pay and benefits for the next, 3-4 months and I'll take it. And then I'll just find myself another job. Who does that? Who does that? So this is CNN Business reporting that negotiators from General Motors and the United Auto Workers Union have reached a tentative deal to end a 31-day strike by nearly 50,000 workers. Okay. Good for them. Nice to hear. The union obviously is very pleased with this. They're kind of crowing about it. This was a 31-day strike that was going on. The details are not immediately available. It was confirmed by Terry Ditz, the UAW's chief negotiator with GM. And the tentative agreement actually needs approval from both the union leadership as well as the rank and file union members at GM before it can take effect. So UAW officials from across the country were already set to meet in Detroit on Thursday. And this had been taken as a sign that they're getting close to having an actual deal. Now, nobody has a time frame for when the workers will actually go back to where they belong at work. And the ratification process can take a week or more to complete. The number one priority of the national negotiation team has been to secure a strong and fair contract that our members deserve, said Ditz. Now, the strike has been the largest at a U.S. business since the last strike at GM, which was way back in the year 2007. That strike was over within 3 days. This has been the longest major strike in the auto industry in more than 20 years. So it could be difficult to actually win rank and file approval of the deal that has been proposed. Strikers will probably want to return to work after missing 4 weeks of paychecks, but membership has been known to reject tentative agreements that have already been reached by their union leadership. That's what happened in the last round of auto contract talks 4 years ago when members at Fiat Chrysler rejected the initial deal that was presented to them. So GM has been very careful not to say too much about the deal. They're kind of concerned that if they make any statements that even sound like they're not what membership wants, it could completely derail the situation. Tracy is actually in the chat. He offered an interesting comment. And Cacti Forever's in there too. Hey, Cacti. GM pays more with more benefits than any other car manufacturer. He says we can look forward to bailing GM out in the future. I ain't looking forward to that. I know that's sarcasm, but I'm not looking forward to more tax dollars going to a private entity that can't seem to get their workers on the same page. I just wish that there wasn't such a stranglehold on the fact that employers should have the right, if people are working for them and the people who are working for them don't want to work for what they're paying, that they should be able to hire people who will. Unbelievable. So the GM investors liked the news that the tentative deal had been reached. Shares of GM rose up about 2% in midday trading. Most of the gain was had after the news that the deal broke. Shares of GM are actually still down 5% since the start of the strike, so they still have a ways to go to, basically catch back up to where they were. The strike has actually halted work at 31 GM factories and 21 other facilities across 9 states, mostly in the middle of the country. It also led to layoffs at other GM plants in Mexico and Canada that had to shut down because of the disruption in their supply chains. Many of the 10,000 U.S. suppliers that provide auto parts and other goods and services to GM laid their staff off as well. That may have idled as many as 200,000 additional workers at those companies. So if the strike actually ends this week, GM will have lost about $1.5 billion in profit, according to an estimate from the Anderson Economic Group. The group also estimates that strikers have lost about $800 million in wages. Last weekend, the union raised strike benefits 10% to $275 a week. But that is still far less than the more than $30 an hour that veteran workers receive when on the job at GM. I know there's people out there, if you're a professional, you make way more than $30 an hour. There are also people out there who they may not have the training that GM gives to their employees. They may not be experienced auto workers, but they might be in manufacturing or plant work in some other sector. And they're looking at that and they're going, $30 an hour? I could get with that, right? So it's just so weird that the entirety of the auto industry, for the unionized workers, their demands for pay and benefits are not based on what their employer has basically said, this is what your job is worth. It's based on what they want, strictly what they want, and what they feel like they're owed after working at a certain rate for a while. They demand an increase. They've not changed their work. And remember, auto workers work with machines, robots that build the cars, so they kind of control the robots. I'm not saying it's not hard work. Obviously, it's hard work. But wow, I mean, anytime they just get a little bee in their bonnet, they're like, we're going to strike. And then they go on strike. And do you hear the unintended consequences? Maybe they're intended, the ripple effects, what happens? Other workers are disenfranchised. They can't work. So supply chain workers who had nothing to do with the strike are actually put out of work by this action. It's kind of amazing. So GM announced plans to close 4 U.S. plants last November, and the union is demanding that some of the vehicles that now the GM is now building in Mexico shift back to U.S. factories. Okay, now I can get with that. I would agree with the unions on that. So those plants had about 3,000 UAW members on payroll at the time of the closing announcement, and GM said it has found other jobs for about 2,300 of those workers, but many had to relocate to take those jobs. Now, the company has offered to invest $8.3 billion in GM plants, and that's an increase of more than $1 billion from its offer at the start of the strike. It is said such investment would create or protect about 5,400 jobs, but the union had continued to push for vehicles to be shifted back from GM plants in Mexico, where it built about 800,000 cars and trucks last year. Now, why are they building them in Mexico? Because the Mexican workers will not demand $30 an hour, which, by the way, Tracy is on point here. He's got another factoid for us. With all the benefits added in, GM pays employees over $80 an hour. That could be why they're shifting their production to Mexico. So there has to be a concession. If GM workers want to demand that the jobs come back to the United States, they have to be willing to agree that they're not going to be able to get either such a rich benefits package or their hourly rate cannot keep ratcheting up over time. There has to be some kind of a balance there, because car buyers are not going to say, well, in order to keep cars in the United States, I want to pay $80,000 for a truck that I most recently paid, $40,000 for. People are not going to absorb those increases. Now, GM and other automakers are dealing with declining U.S. car sales, along with the need to spend billions to develop electric and self-driving vehicles, which I don't actually agree with that either. We don't need electric vehicles. We don't need self-driving vehicles. So stop doing that. You don't need to spend money on that. GM has said much of the $6 billion a year it hopes to save from plant closings would be invested in those research and development efforts. Whatever. So we're getting to a place in America where we absolutely have to have self-driving vehicles? Come on. Wow. So GM has remained very profitable, even in the face of declining sales in both the United States and China, which is now its largest market for car sales. The union said their members made sacrifices to save the company 10 years ago as it went through bankruptcy and a bailout. The union argues that given the record profits that have been reported since then, the workers deserve to be compensated for those sacrifices. Interesting. I can't disagree with that. You can find this story from CNN Business in the show notes for today's program. And I'm just, interested to see what comes of it. I hope they can find their way back to the table and make an agreement. Not so much for them because they're making this decision with their eyes wide open, but for the people who are actually experiencing work stoppage, who are not GM employees, and they haven't said they want to strike, and they don't need to be going without a paycheck. For them to be laid off and not have work is unconscionable. It really is. I understand they're trying to save American jobs, and I can't disagree with that. If they're just striking for pay and benefits, I got to kind of wonder if they're sleeping well at night knowing other people have been laid off because of what they're doing. If they're fighting for American jobs, well, I mean, something's got to give. You can't put all of our jobs in Mexico. You can't keep shipping them off wholesale. Something has to give. So now I want to do the debate recap. So obviously with everything that was going on yesterday, I just couldn't have cared less about the debates last night. I was just not going to watch. But I do think, well, a lot of people watched. And all of the recaps that I've watched, especially the audio clips, video clips of who was talking and who was doing what, shows that Tulsi Gabbard, she was the most searched individual from the debate last night for her comments on Syria, and also because she made a very interesting, not pro-life, but moderate stance on the issue of abortion for American women. So we'll hit that recap when we get back. Guys, more Stacy on the right after this.
Hi everyone, Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Hey everybody, Rachel Ray here. Nothing brings a bigger smile to my face than cooking up a big meal for the whole family and lots of friends. But there's not enough room at my table for the 17 million kids in our country who struggle with hunger. That's why the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks collects surplus food to give hope to hungry kids. But they can't do it without your help. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
A message from Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Woo! Let's get crazy!
In movies, when someone at a party jumps into a pool fully dressed, everyone cheers them on and jumps in too. Just so you know, in real life parties, nobody jumps in after you. You just look stupid.
Come on, jump in! Come on!
Most party fouls are pretty dumb, but if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Learn more at ultimatepartyfoul.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
You know what really gets a party started? Indoor baseball. Yeah, just find a broom or a pool cue, and you can use like anything as a ball. Cans, bottles, shoes. Hey bro, toss me that avocado.
Most party fouls are pretty dumb, but if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Underage drinking and driving, the ultimate party foul. Learn more at ultimatepartyfoul.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
I'm little teapot, short and stout.
Here is my handle and here is my spout.
No, Dad, like this. When I get all steamed up, then I shout, tip me over and pour me out.
This is WWE superstar Roman Reigns. It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take time to be a dad today.
Visit fatherhood.gov, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, Or you, your best man. Your worst man. You, your dog walker. Your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its prediabetes awareness partners.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being here today. Interesting. So this debate recap, I'm waiting for them to cull it down a little bit, guys. I'm almost feeling as if we can't watch it anymore until they decide that they can make an argument that doesn't have anything to do with Donald Trump. I know you're probably thinking, well, that's never going to happen. Well, then it won't happen. It won't happen. They have to be able to articulate arguments for or against policy positions that do not involve President Trump. President Trump is not a dictator, nor is he a member of a monarchy. We are in the United States of America. He is not going to be president forever. He is only going to be president until the end of 2020. And if he wins 4 more years, it will be 4 more years and no more. This is the facts these are the facts as they lay on the ground. These arguments you can ask Joe Biden, what's your name? Impeach Donald Trump. What has your son ever done? Impeach Donald Trump. Is today Tuesday? Impeach Donald Trump. It's like he's a broken record, and he's not the only one. So here's the rundown over at foxnews.com. Fox News is saying the biggest winner of the evening was Elizabeth Warren. Danger, Will Robinson, danger. This woman wants to tax Americans. And yes, I said Americans. Forget about this whole idea that you can tax the rich without increasing taxes on the middle class. Everyone's taxes go up. They say that the middle class taxes don't go down, but we bear the brunt of the burden because we buy the most goods and consumer services after the luxury market. So you have the rich people buying the mostest, but they're a small segment of the population. Then you have us. And yes, I said mostest. I'm making a point here. We buy the most. Then it's the rich folks, but they have a higher tally because they're buying more expensive items. So the items are more expensive, even though the total number are smaller. So again, you have to understand all this stuff before you can even talk about these proposals totaling $90 some odd million. Here, I'll look that up for you real quick. I saw it earlier today. And I should have just pulled it over and had it right there for me. Yeah, let me look here. While I'm pulling this up. Yeah. Okay, there we go. So the rundown over here that I told you about at Fox News says Elizabeth Warren's strong performance will solidify her frontrunner status ahead of Biden and Sanders. She emerged the clear winner of the night by showing she was sharp and prepared as she fended off attacks from candidates who were looking to cut into her polling lead. Now, the danger with her is that she sounds so commonsensical and normal because she spent a lot of time in academia and she talks down to everyone as if she is your better because she's more intelligent than you and she's also your teacher. She's your professor. So she sounds like that. It was also a quality that Barack Obama had in spades where he could kind of sit there and he could adopt a professorial air and kind of, lecture you. He didn't have to be saying things that made sense. He could be flip-flopping on the issues, but the way he would be, I'm Barack Obama and doing all that stuff. And a lot of Americans bought into that. They thought, this is an authority figure. I need to listen. I need to, switch gears, especially the Black community, who the staunchest supporters of biblical worldview before Barack Obama in the country. Hands down, the most church segment of society, and hands down, the most radically changed and altered by the presidency of Barack Obama. He radicalized Black people. Crazy, 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 crazy. So Elizabeth Warren would do the same thing. There were heated exchanges over health care, the wealth tax. She was able to turn a tax leveled against her around and still deliver the best answers of the evening. And she remained the focal point of the debate, speaking for the most amount of time out of all the candidates. And she was the target for their attacks. Everybody was trying to take her down. Now, she has unmatched fundraising and polling momentum. She has a series of strong debate performances under her belt. And you put all of this together with the fact that Joe Biden and Sanders have been weakened in debilitating ways lately, not the same ways, but still very, very harmful for them. It almost guarantees that Warren is going to take over as the front runner. Now, a surprise winner of last night, which I don't know that I agree with him, because if you don't watch the debate, then what you see the most of, the person having the most like buzz on online social media and on the news shows, that's who you think to yourself they had a good night or they came up. And this is interesting. This writer says the surprise winner was Bernie Sanders, who has suffered a really stark decline in the polls recently. Obviously, a lot of it is due to his concerns about his health and stamina because he had a heart attack. But he delivered a strong, forceful performance in the debate, apparently, succeeding in showing voters that he has not lost a step. He was the second place finisher of the night, according to this author. And it's also clear that Warren supplanted Sanders as the leader of the progressive movement in the Democratic field. And as a result, it will be difficult, if not impossible, for Sanders to reestablish himself ahead of Warren. Now, what would be great for him if he wanted to really have some power next go round is if he would step aside in exchange right now, in exchange for tossing his voters over to Sanders would step aside and do so as a bargaining chip to toss his supporters over to Warren and get a concession on either an issue or on, future ability to weigh in on things and help. But he won't do that because he's too proud. Also, he's a socialist, whatevs. So it's pretty clear that Warren has supplanted. This guy says the surprise winner in third place is Pete, the mayor. He's been called a breakout star. This is garbage. This is garbage because his poll numbers don't reflect any kind of breakout in any way. I'm skipping over this part. Sorry, I don't have to read stuff that I think is utter poppycock. Now, this writer, and I keep calling him this writer, it's Douglas Schoen. He's an opinion writer for Fox News. He then goes on to talk about who the losers were. He says the biggest loser of last night was Joe Biden. All eyes, apparently those of Democratic leaders, strategists, and donors, were on Biden. He needed to deliver a strong performance, and he was unable to do it. He wasn't forceful. He dodged questions about his son's work in the Ukraine, and he delivered other word salad answers during the evening. By the way, word salad is he didn't write that. I said that. So with each passing day, he seems to move further and further away from securing the nomination. And this Doug Schoen saying he's going to decline even further from here. I don't disagree. I think he's probably right about that. Amy Klobuchar. Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota has had a number of well-executed lines taking aim at Warren. Many felt similar to the inconsequential attacks leveled at Warren by John Delaney of Maryland during the first debate. Klobuchar's performance is unlikely to result in any spikes that she really needs to remain in this thing. And then Kamala Harris was also the other loser. He says she fell short, failed to distinguish herself. She has hovered at around 5% in the polls, and she's not going to be able to recover the momentum that she lost just 2 months ago. And then he says the other losers were obviously everybody else: Gabbard, Castro, Steyer, Booker, O'Rourke, and Yang. They are all barely registering in the polls. They were the biggest losers of the night. And they've failed to have a breakout moment they desperately need. Now, he doesn't seem aware that Tulsi Gabbard was the most Googled Democratic candidate last night. Americans who had no idea who she was heard her talking about abortion last night and how third trimester abortion should be rare, if at all. And they were like, who is this woman? They heard her talking about Syria, and they wanted to know who she was, and they Googled her. So I'll just say this, and it's not that I don't see merit in what Doug has written here. I think Tulsi Gabbard was one of the surprise winners. Whether it actually results in a polling bump that gives her an opportunity to remain That has to be seen. We don't know if that's actually going to happen. But I do think it's a possibility. It could happen. And therefore, it's much, in my opinion, more likely than any of the other losers. So I talked about something that I'd seen on Twitter this morning. And, interesting. We all heard about the different numbers that they've been putting out. The numbers being how much their policy proposals would cost and how they were asked about it, and they really didn't want to answer. I think anyone who's not willing to talk about what stuff costs is not being a good candidate. If you want to propose things, but you don't want to talk about how much they cost, how can we take you seriously? So there are a few things that they said they wanted to do. Let's talk about Bernie Sanders' proposals for a second here. Bernie says that we have to have Medicare for all. That's $40 trillion. We need a climate plan, $16.3 trillion. We need a jobs for all plan, $30.1 trillion. We need free college for everyone, $3 trillion. Free housing, $2.5 trillion. Social Security expansion, $1.8 trillion. Paid family leave, $1.6 trillion. Infrastructure, $1 trillion. Total cost, $97.3 trillion. How are we going to pay for it? Do you hear the sound of unicorns neighing and like trotting across my front yard here? You don't hear those, just like you don't hear him explaining how we pay for this. Even if we taxed and confiscated the wealth of every single American who is considered to be a part of the 1%, the 10%, even the 20%, even if we took everyone who has a college degree plus all the rich people, took all of their assets, all of their wealth, and all of their income, we could only run the government for like a day or two. And then we'd still be on the hook. And that doesn't even include all his new proposals. So he'd be talking about taxing everybody at pretty much everything. So you'd get all this stuff for free, but you wouldn't have any cash on hand. You'd be working for the government like a serf. Can anybody else understand why dude is not getting anywhere in the polls? Because of that. So the other thing I want to talk about is how everybody keeps characterizing the Trump family as, they try to act as if, they are rich. Okay. They're rich, but they're not as rich as a lot of the people like Tim Steyer and Mark Zuckerberg, the Microsoft founder, Bill Gates. All of the leftists are far wealthier than the Trumps. Let's take an example here. There's some comparisons here. The Trump family, before running for the presidency, was worth about $4.5 billion. President Obama was worth $3 million. Well, actually, I'll go one at a time. The Trump family was worth $4.5 billion. Today, they're worth $3 billion. So they've lost $1.5 billion in wealth and assets since they assumed the presidency. What's that sound? President Trump getting less wealthy and working for free for the American people. That's what that sound is. Obama was worth $3 million when he became the president. Now he's worth $40 million. Clinton was worth $480,000 before he ran for the presidency. That was a long time ago, mind you. It was, but still. Today, Clinton is worth $100 million. Now, they're worth over $250 million together, the Clintons. But if you look at Bill, you go back to his, obviously he was president decades ago. So, but these numbers are still out of our stratosphere. Am I right? And y'all know I don't have that as a problem where I sit up and look at somebody rich or somebody whose house is big and pretty and perfectly remodeled or, I don't have that in me that I'm jealous of that kind of stuff. I don't envy it. I feel like the Lord gives what he knows you can handle. And sometimes he doesn't give because he wants you to be happy. Because sometimes I've seen too many stories of people who have a lot of money and they're unhappy because the money comes with so many, it's things people will do to you if they know you're rich, things people will say about you if they know you're rich, the way they treat you if they know you're rich. Whereas if you're not rich, you're not on anybody's target. So, and I also know what the Bible says about wealth. I've met some amazing people who are wealthy and they're godly and their light shines and their money is just something that they have control over. It doesn't own them. And I've also met miserable wealthy people. I've met miserable poverty-stricken people, and I've met poverty-stricken people who they come in the room and you just light up. You can't wait to get next to them and spend some time with them and soak up some of what they've got. So it's not the wealth. So I don't say this because I'm upset that Clinton's worth $100 million or his wife's worth $250 million or whatever it is. It's because they did all that while they were being political. They gained that on our backs, insider trading, deals, lobbying, etc., selling their name, selling access, and they don't want you to get there. They're fine with being there, but they don't want you there. I can't get with that. No. So, yeah, we covered that. You know, I'm kind of like, you know how it is when you talk about something and you think, interesting. All right, I'm going to go into the chat room just a quick second. This was something interesting that I think Tracy shared in the chat room, that up to 35% of black men are planning on voting for Trump, and that was a story over at Big League Politics. Now let me just pull that up real quick. And I did see some data on that before. The last time I saw a poll, it said something like 25%. So this is a new number. And apparently what's interesting is that you can kind of look at that as men who are working now, men who've seen their families' actual trajectories change, men who've now become a part of something fantastic. They don't want that change. They don't want that to change. And so I'm typing in black men voting for Trump so I can pull this up. He just put this in the chat room there. He actually put the link in there. If you go on to stacyontheright.com during the show, you can watch the live stream there and take part in the chat there. She lives in California, by the way. So let me see if I can find it. And if I can't find it now, I'll just keep looking for it. Yeah, there's the break. What I'll do is I will find this story and I will pull it up and I will have it for you when we get back from the break. I have other stories that I prepared for the show, but this one's good, the polling numbers. So we'll be back with that and more after this. Stay there.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi.
Oh, hey. Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit stoptextsstopwrecks.org. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Okay, kids, Dad's gonna teach you how to dance. First, spread your feet apart. Then, pump your knee, nod your head, shake your hips, and bite your lip ever so slightly. Now, with one hand in the air, point at people with the other hand. I call that the rock star.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids.
Now, make a face like it just smells something bad.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Is that a faucet running? That's not a faucet. That's a river rushing through the forest. Forest rivers provide over 100 million people with clean water to drink.
What? I can't hear you because of the vacuum.
That's not a vacuum. That's the trees in the forest cleaning up the air we breathe.
I didn't know the trees were so amazing.
Yep, and the forest gives us shade, trees to climb.
That's awesome. Let's go explore some more.
Visit the forest today and enjoy all it does, just for you. To learn more about the forest and find one near you, go to discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Jill, why didn't you tell the class what you did this weekend?
Well, my dad and I went in search of some magical minnows and found a zillion of them in the stream from our lookout rock. Then my sister and I escaped from an evil slug king and went back to my super twig fort for safety. Then we told stories till it got dark, and the Big Dipper led us all the way home.
Where were you, Jill?
We went to the forest. It's not that far away.
Ask your parents to take you and your friends to the forest this week. It's closer than you think. Check out discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
What if I could tell you that a full-blown wildfire was going to occur tomorrow, right where you live? Tell you exactly which neighborhoods it would engulf and how fast it would do it. The first thing you would do is talk with your loved ones and make a plan today. It's true, I can't tell you a wildfire will strike tomorrow, but shouldn't you make a plan anyway? Go to ready.gov/communicate and make your emergency plan today. Don't wait, communicate.
brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the program. So I mentioned the story that was posted in the chat room by Tracy. It says, according to the findings of a new Hill-Harris-X poll, a shocking 32% of black men who are voters would prefer to vote for Donald Trump over a generic Democratic opponent in the 2020 presidential election. The Hill reported the data deceptively by claiming that an overwhelming majority of black voters would support a Democrat in 2020 over President Trump. It didn't mention Trump's impressive support among black men in their report about the poll. This is fascinating. 32%. They support the president against a Democratic challenger. Only 7% of black females would support him over the generic Democrat. The black community may be split on gender lines over President Trump, but he has undoubtedly amassed an impressive level of support from the men for a Republican contender. So do you think it's the criminal justice reform bill, the First Step Act? Could it possibly be the strong performance in the economy? I've told you before, I'm kind of Ann Coulter-esque when it comes to the efficacy of women in the voting booth. And I'm a woman. And it doesn't mean I hate women or I hate myself. It just means that I understand that women are very emotionally driven and easily swayed by words instead of facts, charts, data, and quantifiable, verifiable information. And I find it disturbing. I think it's crazy that women are like that, especially when obviously we should have our emotional centers. They're stronger than it is with the men. And it's because we're caregivers and we're more empathetic. But the idea that we don't care anything about what people do, we just care about how they make us feel. Come on. You know what I'm saying? Come on. That it just has to be something we as women work on. We have to work on that. So I mentioned that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the stories that I shared yesterday at the Pastor's Appreciation briefing. This was just really, it was such a pleasure to be there with them and to have such a large group of people who were leaders in the community be able to just sit and listen to my thoughts. It was just wonderful. So I want to give you the three stories. Well, I'm going to give you two of the three stories that I shared. And the first one I shared was Ephesians 5:8 says, you were formerly in darkness, but now you are light in the Lord, walk as children of light. And I talked about eternal implications and how anyone who serves in the ministry has the eternal implications of their work on their mind. It stays with you. You think about it like either you're thinking about it right when you're doing the work, or it's called to your remembrance when someone reaches out and says, you prayed about this on the radio. I'm just speaking about myself personally. Or you brought up this issue and your encouragement segment on this or that, I held on to that, or whatever the case may be, because I've gotten emails like this before. And I can tell you it's so humbling because you wonder if first of all, how many people are listening? Is anybody getting anything out of it? You hope that you're doing something that helps. And so when I got those emails, especially when we left the old place, it was just pretty amazing to see the response from people who'd been touched by things that I'd shared on the show. And so I kept that in mind as I was working on this speech because I thought it was super important to, first of all, I'm not a pastor and I'm not a minister. I don't lead a congregation. So there's even more responsibility that goes with that because it's not just a radio audience that tunes in. Some people tune in sporadically. Some people are just now figuring out that I'm not still at the old place. I know that because they've emailed me and said, where are you? They haven't listened since the summer. They just came back and realized there's been a change. Other people are like the people in the chat room at StacyOnTheRight.com, are listening every single day. Notice when I'm not here. And, you know, I've received really encouraging words from them too. So I wanted to share some examples from our own church. And I talked about a few years ago how our pastor came up with, it was basically a focus on prayer. As Christians, prayer, our primary method for communicating with God and finding out what he wants us to do as his hands and feet. And so this is a continual dialogue and conversation that we have with our Father, not the, hey, your child is sick. And this is important to pray over your sick children, but I'm talking about the continual thing, building up that relationship, not just the emergency stuff, but the full-time relationship. So back then, this was like 6, maybe 7 years ago, the pastor called the congregation to join him. No, it was more like 4 years ago, to join him in a 6-week church-wide book study. And the book was Growing in Prayer by Pastor Mike Bickle. And so each Sunday he went over the chapter and, read from it and taught from it. And it was so rich that I felt like God was stretching me out, because I kind of thought I knew a little something about prayer until I read that book. And then in the spring, we undertook the next 6 weeks of studying and finished the book off. And it was something amazing because our family did it together. I would go to Bible study at church, and then we would do it together as a family once a week. And so in pointing us to prayer, he shifted thousands of people into a closer walk with God. And there had to be times when our pastor looked out and thought, how many people are getting something out of this? Like, what percentage of the congregation is getting something out of this? You want results. You want to see the fruit of your work. But that is kind of antithetical to the way God works, because he says to us as his disciples who are discipling others, he says, go out and disciple people, but don't worry about the result. You don't go back and check and see, hey, I shared a scripture with you, or hey, I invited you to church. And you kind of go back and basically browbeat the person to make sure that they got what you were putting down and that they've come to the Lord. You just share with them. You invite them to church. You do whatever it is you feel led to do. And then God takes over and does the rest. You basically just sow the seed, and God waters, and someone else maybe waters it. And God brings the growth, is what I'm saying. And so 1 Corinthians 15:58 says, therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil in the Lord is not in vain. So obedience is the key. When God says, hey, pray with your friend, do it. Don't think to yourself, oh, I don't want to be all, because that's how we do. I feel the same thing. When I feel led to pray for somebody or to, make an overture, the first thing that happens is I hear a voice in my head that sounds just like me saying, she doesn't want that. She's not interested in that. Leave her alone. Don't embarrass yourself. But we have to be willing to go out there and do it. So as we Christians courageously walk in faith with a clear knowledge that God's word does not return void, we know he's able and willing to fulfill every promise that's contained in Scripture. So the question is, do we operate in this culture as if we know the answers and want to lead others to the truth? I ask these things of you because the fact is we see a world bursting with people who need a Savior, but we're afraid to tell them how to get saved. So this is the second story, and I love this story. It's a true story. My Bible study fellowship leader shared a story with us about a time a few years ago when she and a group of people traveled to New York City. And they went to the Sam's Club there and bought the kind of folding table that costs like $39 or $49. And they had crates that they bought from there, and they bought cases of water. They went to Central Park, set up the tables, set up the crates underneath with the water bottles, and put a handmade sign up that said, what is your concern? I'll pray with you. Now, all the way there, from the moment she agreed to go, she had been feeling in her mind and her feelings that they wouldn't be well received, that someone would call the police on them because they were, doing Christianity in public, and that there would just be something negative involved, that people wouldn't be responsive. But instead, people lined up around Central Park. The line just snaked on and on. They started at a little after 5 a.m. and kept praying with people all day until dark. This is in the cold. This is in one of the coldest months in New York. They're out there doing this with their coats on and stuff. The people were hurting and they wanted prayer. There were poor people, people who walked up with brand names you could see from a mile away. There were men, women, there were atheists, there were Jewish people. People who came up and said, I don't believe in God, but you're here. You say you can pray. If you believe in him and you'll talk to him on my behalf, I have problems. And then I don't know how to fix it. They literally were like, you will pray for me? Come on. I'm in line. I'm waiting for an opportunity for you to pray for me. In one of the most ungodly places on the face of the planet, they were able to pray all day long and not meet everyone's needs. They're exhausted. They just had to quit. So some people came to Christ right on the spot. Others just had time in prayer and moved on. It is totally counterintuitive to travel to New York City and set up a folding table with a homemade sign and pray for strangers. But they were told to do it. They did it. They were obedient, and God brought the harvest. The same thing happened here recently. Similar thing. 10daysstlouis.com actually prayed across the metro area over the course of 10 days. They were literally going from neighborhood to neighborhood, covering the city in prayer. And they now have another thing that they're going to do, which I'll share on the air with you. Actually, he gave it to me yesterday, and I have a little stack of things from yesterday's, because so many people gave me things like little flyers and things about stuff they're doing to share. So I'll share all of that in one load. To kind of give you all the things. And I know some of you are nowhere near St. Louis, but if these are ideas that you think to yourself, wow, we should do that, that's a part of why I'm sharing it. And so that's exactly what God has called us to do. Pastor Gary Rohrmeyer said, vision is capturing God's assignment. And I think if we could just get outside of ourselves and believe that God's word never returns void, believe what God says about us, that we're a royal priesthood clothed in white, that the glory of the Lord is our rear guard, that he won't allow us to dash our foot. And that's not about physical. That's in the spiritual realm. Once we belong to him, we are forever protected. Our spirits are going to live on with him through eternity forever. He is interested in not just the relationship he has with us, but in us being disciples and telling other people about the goodness of God, the thing that he's doing in our lives, so that other people can be saved too. And so I was encouraging these pastors and leaders yesterday. I was sharing my heart with them because I do have a heart for people who have been called into ministry and they give up so much of what we find satisfying, just vegging out on the weekend and gardening, drinking hot tea, doing a couple of art projects, and then, maybe watching television. When people are called into ministry, they often spend a lot of their free time working as well. It's like a full-time 24-hour a day, 7-day a week calling where they don't get a lot of rest. And so they deserve to have someone just look them in the face, which I got to do yesterday, and say, God loves you and you are doing an amazing job, and thank you. And so that was my privilege yesterday, to get to share those two stories with those people. I shared one more, which was a personal one that I've already shared on the air before. So I'm not going to share it again here now, especially since we only have 2 minutes left. Actually, that was one story. I shared the other story was about the red team and the blue team. It's a sports story. It's too long for me to share in this 2 minutes. I'm sorry, guys. I only shared one story with you. I didn't share two. Looks like I have to share tomorrow. So, but it was amazing. They had a choir there that sang. Oh my goodness, their voices. So I was up near the front, y'all, because I was at the table where you sit, where if you're a speaker, you need to be close to the front so you can get up to the stage real quick. And so I could hear them, not their voices through the microphone, but their actual voices. These women had those choir voices where, the voices have kind of a wavy tonality to it. And you think to yourself, if I close my eyes, this might be what heaven sounds like. Because these chicks were loud. Their voices were beautiful and clear. And the men were harmonizing and they were singing. One of the songs was a contemporary Christian song that you hear if you listen to Joy FM or K-Love, you hear it all the time. And if you don't, you probably have heard it maybe in a store somewhere while you've been shopping. And then the other song that they sang was Mary, Did You Know? And I knew I had to get up and speak in a few minutes, so I wasn't about to start bawling and crying. But y'all, I was, Christmas is my favorite. I would start Christmas next week if I could. But apparently we have to hang around for Halloween, which I hate. And then we can actually get into the fun. Well, basically, we always wait until the day after Thanksgiving. My husband's like, you can't do Thanksgiving and Christmas at the same time. I feel like we can, but anyway, submitted and in agreement. All right. That's the show for today. God bless. Talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great night.